almost without thinking, I now find myself switching between auto and manual control depending on what I want from the shot, and things like tone remapping can sometimes conflict with your manual control app. Problems like flickering skies, or a camera which refuses to retain the exposure settings you just set, and they start to ruin your shot. So that's something really important you need to think about before going ahead and choosing a device, especially if you're hoping to use manual control. Anyway, let's take a look at the best smartphone for shooting video for 2021. Once again, Apple has been changing the landscape of filmmaking this year, but not only with their iPhone range. Since they dropped Intel chips from their laptop and desktop computers, they've opened up an exciting new era where their smartphones and computers will operate under the same system. The new MacBooks and Mac Minis are lightning fast, but it's more affordable speed than before. And by comparison, the launch of the new iPhone 12 range created less of a buzz, despite the popular retro look of the iPhones, which is much loved. Less of a buzz, despite the popular retro look of the iPhones, which is much loved by iPhone fans. The general feeling is the devices themselves haven't made any giant leaps from the iPhone 11. More of a few tweaks here and there. The one big change to come for filmmakers is the inclusion of Dolby Vision in the iPhone 12 range. Dolby Vision is a system designed to shoot, master and deliver 10-bit HDR, which is high dynamic range, video. Why does this matter? In the past, smartphones, like many other non-professional DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, have captured video in an 8-bit H.264 or H.265 codec and captured video in an 8-bit H.264 or H.265 codec, and this is heavily compressed to reduce file sizes and enable them to be streamed or shared. But it also means discarding a lot of information from the video, which reduces dynamic range and makes it harder to color grade. This kind of video falls apart if you try to push it too much with color grading software. Bear in mind, anything shot in Dolby Vision will only contain the extra HDR quality when viewed via a system which supports it. For example, if you upload your Dolby Vision video to Twitter, YouTube, Facebook and so on, Dolby Vision, as far as I know, is not supported. Therefore what you will get will be the standard dynamic range version of the video. Now, because Dolby Vision requires a license to use, and, well, it's complicated. Regardless of whether you have a Dolby Vision display or not, the iPhone 12 range of devices can use that extra information for color work later, which for filmmakers who want those color grading options is a big plus. The good news for iPhone filmmakers comes with the top-of-the-range 12 Pro Max. This device is very big and comes with a 6.7-inch display. There's a 2.5 times telephoto lens, although that's only half the power of the top-range Samsungs with their photo lens. With their 5 times telephotos. The Pro Max also comes with a larger sensor than the rest of the iPhone 12 range, which gives it a better low-light performance. Now, the iPhone 12 range, and specifically the iPhone 12 Pro Max, produce top-of-the-range video, as you would expect. 4K resolution up to 60 frames per second. There's also support for 120 frames per second and 240 frames per second at 1080p resolution. Having said all that, there are some issues, so let's mention the minus points. Sometimes we want lens flares. The users have started to complain about the recent iPhones and the way they produce nasty-looking reflections when light hits the lens at certain angles. Being kind, we can call them lens flares, but this problem does not seem to have been fixed and may even be worse in the iPhone 12 range. Now, you also get these flares in other devices, but usually it's just a small dot, but in the iPhone it seems to be much more prominent. If you're going to label something pro, then surely a minimum for professional filmmaking is manual control. For shutter speed, surely a minimum for professional filmmaking is manual control. for shutter speed, ISO, white balance and so on. But Apple's iPhones still don't carry their own native manual control with their devices. So we can install one of the many third-party apps like Filmic Pro, Mavis, ProTake and so on, right? Only problem is, all this software wizardry, like tonal remapping, sometimes conflicts with these apps, and you get flickering skies and auto-exposure overriding your settings. Well, these flickered wizardry, like tonal remapping, sometimes conflicts with these apps, and you get flickering skies and auto-exposure overriding your settings. Well, these two gripes aside, iPhones still produce amazing quality. Samsung brought out their 20 range of devices, the S20, S20 Pro, Pro Ultra, Note 20 and Note 20 Ultra, in 2 stages, the 2020 S20 range in February and the Note 20 in August. Now, the talk is that Samsung will launch the Galaxy S21 range on January the 14th next year. But the quality of video produced by Samsung devices is basically equal to the iPhone. Samsung tends to add more saturation, but otherwise there's really not much between them. As you would expect, the higher up the Samsung range you go, the better the cameras and video shooting performance. But all the Samsung S20 and Note 20 range include one S21 range on January the 14th next year. But the quality of video produced by Samsung devices is basically equal to the iPhone. Samsung tends to add more saturation, but otherwise there's really not much between them. As you would expect, the higher up the Samsung range you go, the better the cameras and video shooting performance. But all the Samsung S20 and Note 20 range include one front camera and 3 rear cameras, regular wide, ultra wide and telephoto. The Note 20 models have the 5x telephoto. One difference between iPhone and Samsung Ultra models is the ability to shoot 8K resolution. Well, as most of us can't view 8K resolution, let alone see the difference if we could, this probably isn't much use to us video shooters. I certainly wouldn't buy a S20 Ultra just for the 8K video. Another difference is Samsung's Pro Video mode. Now, this is a native camera function which allows you to set and lock shutter speed, ISO, focus and all the rest. So that's pretty useful there. And instead of Dolby Vision, Samsung devices come with the HDR. You set and lock shutter speed, ISO, focus and all the rest. So that's pretty useful there. And instead of Dolby Vision, Samsung devices come with the HDR 10+ system. And while Apple is only just introducing this, Samsung have included this in their devices for some time. In terms of smartphone video quality, there's little difference between the two HDR systems. While iPhones can shoot slow motion at a max of 240 frames per second, Samsung's latest devices have the super slow-mo 960 frames per second option. Although this feature is limited to 720p, which is still considered high definition, by the way. And so, now on to the minus points. Well, for some reason, Samsung only allows you to access the main camera in Pro Video mode. There's no access to the selfie camera, ultra-wide or telephoto. The best thing would be if Samsung allowed Pro Video mode to access each lens, so you can decide for yourself. Even third-party apps like Filmic Pro cannot access the telephoto. That gripe aside, I really can't fault the new Samsung range. The main, larger sensor of the Note 20 Ultra even gives you a little extra shallow depth of field, and the quality of the footage is stunning. Which smartphone maker is doing the most for filmmakers? Is it Apple? Which smartphone maker is doing the most for filmmakers? Is it Apple or Samsung? The answer is Sony. Unlike Apple and Samsung, Sony makes professional level cinema cameras. So it's not surprising they introduced the first smartphone range with a serious native manual control app, the Xperia 1 and Xperia 5. That app is the Cinema Pro app. These phones and the app are developed alongside Sony's professional cameras. Sony have now released the new version of these phones, Xperia 1 Mark II and Xperia 5 Mark II. The Xperia 5 version, Mark 1 and 2, is virtually the same as the Xperia 1, just smaller. Both versions have the same front and rear cameras. For rear cameras, there's the now standard wide, ultra-wide and telephoto. And this triple camera array integrates tech from both Sony Alpha and
Я тоже немножко проголодался, честно говоря. try to try things. No name. И титик у меня нет, так что. Уроки? Зачем тебе уроки-то? Тебе это недостаточно, что ли, чтобы кайфовать? Попробуй спеть это хором. Он тебя понял уже? Да-да, вот она это. Да. Что-то как-то сегодня плохо.
Nice optics. The Xperias have a ×3 telephoto with a 12 megapixel sensor. In fact, like Apple, Sony have stuck with the 12 megapixel sensor for all their cameras. However, these sensors are slightly different in terms of pixel size, and bigger pixels means better low-light performance. But the big difference is that their native Camera Pro app allows you to access all these lenses. Therefore, you can happily choose which lens you want to use, as you would expect, from something labeled Pro. So the Cinema Pro app is stuck with the 12 megapixel sensor for all their cameras. However, these sensors are slightly different in terms of pixel size, and bigger pixel Xperias have a ×3 telephoto with a 12 megapixel sensor. In fact, like Apple, Sony have stuck with the 12 megapixel sensor for all their cameras. However, these sensors are slightly different in terms of pixel size, and bigger pixels means better low-light performance. But the big difference is that their native Camera Pro app allows you to access all these lenses. Therefore, you can happily choose which lens you want to use, as you would expect, from something labeled Pro. So the Cinema Pro app has been updated for the new release. There's now support for 25 frames per second, Touch AF, autofocus, custom white balance, metered manual, and some user interface improvements. There's also 2K 10-bit HDR at 120 frames per second and 4K 10-bit HDR 60 frames per second, set to be on its way via an Android update. Both old and new versions of the Xperia allow 10-bit color depth, which, has only just arrived for the iPhone. Just saying. And now for some downsides. Some missing features in the Cinema Pro app compared to apps like Filming Pro and MC Pro 24PS. For example, no scopes or histograms. But hopefully this is something Sony will bring in the future. I would say the Xperia's produced video, which has its own look, which is rather more muted than other devices. The color is not out of the box so vibrant, and these softer, more natural tones don't kind of hit you in the face, but perhaps easier on the eye over longer watching times. LG phones have included a dedicated Pro Mode video app for manual control since the V10 version, released way back in 2015. But the LG V range has a reputation of being great phones for shooting video at a lower price than their better-known competitors. However, the most recent LG V60 Thin Q is still selling for around $700 or more, and this is for a device released in March 2020. Like the top Samsung phones, the LG V60 can shoot up to 8K. Nobody can view it, but you can shoot it. This device also lacks the telephoto lens, carrying only a wide and ultra-wide for rear cameras. The manual mode for video in the LG V60 Thin Q includes
Утро вечером мудренее, я думаю, да, ты ничего не понимаешь. Кого не было? Наоборот, только да, комплексы просто, я, наверное, понял, понимаете, да? Да, проблема нет, видишь, надо заниматься. Наоборот, нет, нет. Эй! Ладно, все. Я все время забываю, насколько опасна жизнь, понимаешь? Все время вот забываю, опять раз-то да, забываю. Ну ты так не согласен, да. Что я никто, и что, блин, да. Я такой, ой, блин, и это, блин. И этим понравилось, и этим угодил, да, и всем вообще такой, вообще молодец, вообще, да. Чтобы противоположность. Ну вот это он. Да. О себе так не представляю.